Yep, to the yep. You already know what time it is, man. It's your girl P.O.C. We back live, 900 AM WRD 96.1 Word Radio. I'm excited to get the second part of this show jumping here on Friday, December the 6th. Again, it's just so shocking to say we're in the last month of the year, but the first Friday of the month, and we definitely gonna start it right here on Eco Word. You already know you can be a part of the conversation, 215-634-8065, toll free, 1-866-361-0900. You can always download the app in your Google Play stores and your Apple stores now. Word Radio. You can listen to us all day. You know, we got a jam-packed show listing throughout the day. And then you can always make sure you see my face as well as my guest beautiful face on Word TV. Click that link in the bio to take you directly where you need to be. But right now, we got a special guest on the line. They're doing something different, but making a lot of noise in the right direction. And I'm really excited to be speaking with this communication manager for the Youth of Climate Finance Alliance, Isabella Guinigundo. Good morning. How are you? Welcome to EcoWord. When it comes down to the Youth Climate Finance Alliance, please introduce yourself and tell the people exactly who you're listening to.
So my name is Isabella, and I work at the Youth Climate Finance Alliance. We're a youth-led network of individual organizers and organizations, all focused on taking down corporate climate villains and ending extractive industries. We believe that young people across the so-called US have immense revolutionary potential, and with support, resources, and community, they can radically transform the world for the better. So through training, coaching, and microgrants, Youth Finance Alliance is giving young people the tools they need, not just to build power now, but to become lifelong organizers in the global movement for liberation.
For sure. And Isabel, I gotta ask you because the first thing that people think about when they think young people doing something as
Yeah.
big as the work that you all are doing is their first thought is saying it's not gonna get done, it can't get done. And you all have proven time and time again how the work can get done and how pushing these amazing resources can really thrive in different communities around this world, especially here in the United States. So let's talk a little bit about that. Just the mission. Like, how did you guys get started?
Yeah. So like most people, we know that like the extraction and burning of fossil fuels is ravaging and displacing communities across the globe, right?
Mhm.
From pollution across the US to deadly typhoons, in my family's home country of the Philippines. Um, but after the 2019 climate strikes, where we saw youth across the world really rise up and say, we're ready for climate action, myself and my friends at Youth Climate Finance Alliance really sat down and thought to ourselves, well, there's some more, villains who are implicated in this beyond just the fossil fuel industry. We know that the fossil fuel industry is ruthlessly committed not just to continuing, but increasing the extraction of oil, coal, and gas. But there are companies behind them who are allowing them to do that. So fossil fuel corporations, they need bank accounts, they need insurance, they need loans, they need investors. Without access to finance, massive projects like pipelines and mountaintop removal wouldn't have the cash that they need to get off the ground. Employees couldn't be paid, shareholders wouldn't invest. So ultimately, what we kind of realized is as young people in the US, we had this really strategic advantage, I guess, against the industry of US finance capital. These banks, these insurance companies, and investment firms, they know that our generation is their future workforce. And so at Youth Climate Finance Alliance, what we're doing is leveraging that future worker power to get the banks to stop the flow of money to fossil fuels once and for all.
That's beautiful. And you actually taught me some things
Thanks.
along the way for sure. And how long have you all been doing this work?
We've been doing it since for the past 2 years now. Our organization has been up and running and been resourcing other youth climate groups across the country.
For sure. And, I know that this may be a very cliche question, but some people really do want to know the answer. Why is the work that
Yeah.
you are doing so important for the next generation, especially your generation?
Yeah, I mean, we know that the earth that we're living on, and the air we breathe and the food we drink, these are some of the most vital resources that we have. They are literally what, allow us to sustain to sustain our lives and our livelihoods. And so for us, it's an investment in ourselves and in future generations. But we also know that through this kind of um, very radical actions that are really grasping the issue at the roots, that we
Mhm.
can bring about a more just society, right? So it's not just like we want to get rid of the amount of carbon emissions. It's like we want to build something totally new in the process. We want to build a society that's really founded on values of reciprocity, founded on values of justice. And we believe that tackling the issue through this lens of finance and that building up really strong communities across the country will allow us to build that new world.
hmm And this country is really ran off of dollar signs, monies, and money and
Yeah.
numbers, right? So when you think about just like
Yeah.
the amount of data and research that you all have to put in to even come up with, the strategic planning to go after these big banks and financiers and investors, what does that look like for you all as an organization?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say, as someone who grew up in the youth climate movement, I oftentimes found myself, paying out of pocket for the things that I was doing. I'd be organizing a strike with my friends at our city, and oftentimes we didn't have the monetary resources to really pull together what we knew we needed to. And yeah, as I said, like kids like myself were, going into our piggy banks and paying for megaphones up front. And that to us is like a real problem that exists in youth organizing, across issues here in the US. And so what we've done is really try to prioritize being able to leverage our position as a nonprofit organization to basically redistribute funds to youth organizers who are doing that like grassroots work, whether they're working on finance or say they're just working to stop a specific pipeline project or building a community garden in their home city. So we have a program called the Organizer Support Fund, where we basically re-grant any of the money, a bunch of money that we have coming into us, and give it to young people who might not be able to get their projects off the ground without some kind of small grants that we have access to. And so we've really put in the work to try and, as I said, like re-grant and redistribute some of the wealth that's kind of honestly right now just sitting in a bunch of big nonprofits and not really being distributed to grassroots organizations. So that's like a really near and dear to our heart, and something that we've worked really hard to expand and yeah, build up.
Yeah, and that makes me want to, further the question that I was asking as far as like the research that you all are doing, right? To even know how
Yeah.
to get to these young folks, get to these young organizations as well. But how do you all know how to do the research to not just one re-grant, but then also to make sure that the people who are getting funded but not doing anything with the funding is also being held accountable?
Yeah. So for us, all of our staff are people who have been in and out of the youth climate movement for the past decade, I would say. Many of us feel really connected to this movement. We're a part of it. We have countless of friends and comrades who have been a part of it. For the past 50 years or so, even. And to us, it's really important to be accountable to that wider movement. So, yeah, we do a lot of making sure that we're running the programs and the research and all of the different things that we do by our partner organizations, who, as I said, have been doing this work for the past
Awesome.
50 or so years. We run it by groups of young people who are currently doing the work, and really, it's about building connections across the country. That's really been the biggest thing for us it is really like checking our research by going to the people who are, you know, experiencing the worst of the climate crisis firsthand.
And we got about 5 minutes before we go to our next commercial break. And again, I appreciate you for
Yeah.
coming through. And we're speaking with Isabella, who is the communications manager for the Youth Climate Finance Alliance. And I want to ask you, Isabella, when it comes down to finding solutions, right? I just recently had a
Mhm.
conversation with someone who is fighting against the proposed 76ers arena here in the 70s, here in the city of Philadelphia. I'm sorry. And,
Yeah.
everyone wants to get to a solution, but so many people have
Mhm.
different ideas and perspectives and opinions on how we should get to that solution. And I know young people, you get riled up, you get excitement, just the vision of what you want to see can definitely take over sometimes. So how do you all stay together, Isabella, as far as just the young movement, as far as the young people in the movement of climate change and climate action?
Yeah. No, I've definitely that's definitely been a big question, I think, on the hearts and minds of folks in the past couple of months. And I think for us, this question of like, how do we come together and how do we build what we would call, a positive political vision, something that we can all unite around. That comes from having really strong connections and really strong relationships with people all across the country, all across the movement. And so for us, like our one of the really great things about being this massive network of people is that we're able to connect with folks who are experiencing climate change in various different ways and are also in various different types of communities, right? So organizing in, say, New York City is very different than organizing in Houston, Texas.
Big facts.
So we do a lot to bring those groups of people together. And get us all in a room together and figure out like, okay, how do we take this strategy that we have and how do we tailor it to the individual places where all of us are at? How do we, figure out how to assess the different risks that come about, based on the different cities that we're organizing in? Because as I said, it is really different based on where you're at, what community you're a part of. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't invest in the communities where it can feel harder to organize. And in fact, I believe pretty strongly that means we should invest even more
Yeah.
money, resources, time, and energy into those places because they deserve it and they need it the most.
And do you feel like young folks right now, just in the climate action movement, do you feel like they are willing to take heed of like what came before them in order to not necessarily reinvent the wheel, but help innovate that wheel to keep going and to keep moving?
Yeah,
Or
I
do you
love
feel
that
like a lot of
question. I
young
think
folks want to reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, I think we see that a lot in movements of all kinds, right? Where people come in and they're like, "Oh, we must be the first people to ever have this idea. Like, we're so great." And the thing is that that's almost never the case, right? There have been generations of people doing movement work long before us. And so something we're really trying to do is build up the infrastructure we need to pass on the knowledge that we have, right? Like I know that there have been people organizing in my city for decades and decades, and yet I don't currently have access to, written notes or
Yeah.
forums or places to actually go and talk with those folks. And so what we've been really working on is thinking about ways where we can bring movement elders into the same room as young folks, and come together and come up with some new ways to like record some of our organizing history because that's so important. And yeah, that's been a big part of what we've been thinking about
All right.
recently with with this, we have an upcoming event called the Bonfire Convergence, which I can talk more about later. But yeah, it's been a big piece of we're bringing people together from all across the country, and primarily young folks are our audience, but we're also going to bring in some movement elders to come in and tell us about what they've done, and hopefully we can learn from them.
For sure. Isabella, we're about to go to a quick commercial break. Right after this quick commercial break, you'll hear more from Isabella, who is the communications manager for the Youth Climate Finance Alliance. You can find more information on their website at ycfalliance.com. I should have let you do that, Isabella. Please tell the people how they can find
You're
you
good.
and stay locked, please, and give them your social media as well.
Yeah, YCF Alliance is .com is our website, and you can go to our Instagram, which is Youth Climate Finance, as well.
No doubt. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break. It's your girl, P.O.C. Eco word, eco word, eco word.